When we look at oligopoly, oligopoly is a market structure where there are few firms controlling significant market share. And here, when we look at market share, what we look at is something called the concentration ratio. Concentration ratio basically is tells us what percentage of market share is held by X amount of firms. So if I'm finding concentration ratio, let's say of 4 firms, for example, so it will tell me CR4 would be basically the percentage share of market held by the largest 4 firms. I mean, CRX would be percentage share of market held by largest X firms. So if this concentration ratio is high, this means the 4 firms are controlling large part of the market. For example, in Pakistan's car industry, Toyota, Honda and Suzuki almost control 80% of the market, 80% of the market, right? So the concentration ratio will be 0.8. A large concentration ratio means that few large firms control a significant part of the market. So what we argue is this, that a concentration ratio is very close to 1. It's a ratio, so the value lies between 0 and 1, where for oligopoly, the CR is roughly 0.6 to 0.8 of the top 4 firms, which means roughly 60 to 80% of the market is held by large players. Another important feature of oligopoly is this, that there is strong barriers to entry. Probably that's why the concentration ratio is high, but strong barriers to entry would mean it's difficult for new firms to enter or exit. And that is an important reason why only few firms exist in the market. And what the reason why the strong barriers to entry or exit happens is because of advertising sometimes, it's because of setup cost is too high. Like airline is an oligopoly market, banking is an oligopoly market. All of these are examples of markets where there is a high setup cost and therefore high exit costs as well. And also Coke and Pepsi is an oligopoly market where there's tons of money spent on advertising and so on. And a very important feature which is not found in other market structure is interdependence. Interdependence basically means that since there are only few firms in the market, then these few firms in the market are dependent on each other. They're dependent on each other in terms of price and output decision. What do we mean by this? So if I'm Pepsi, my decision of what output I need to make and the price that I need to charge would take into account what Coke would do when I change my price. Pepsi's decision about its price is not an independent decision. It has to be taken into account how my rival will react to it. And that's why it's kind of like a theory where you are looking at how rival firms will react to any decision is taken into account when any decision is made. Okay, so that's another feature that we need to look at. And because of this interdependence, we'll also soon see that firms under oligopoly has what we call price rigidity. Prices don't change that often. And the reason why they don't change that often is because firms under oligopoly normally rely on what we call non-price factors. So non-price competition, like for example advertising and so on, is normally what firms may rely upon, and we'll see why in some sort of models that we'll study in a little while. Last feature that I want to quickly talk about is about, like when you look at oligopoly, there is also like your nature of product. The nature of product in oligopoly could be identical, which is homogeneous, or could even be differentiated. It doesn't really matter. Identical would mean, example could be sugar industry. In, for example, Pakistan is sort of oligopoly, or even like oil industry. Like ultimately, if you look at oil put sellers, they're all selling the same oil, named under different brands. Well, that's different. They won't like that. But yeah, Pepsi and Coke are seemingly same. They spend tons of money to be differentiated. But anyways, but that's not identical. There's difference. They are two different products. But oil to same, and sugar be same, and all that. But differentiated would be your example could be your car industry, for example, or even like banking, may different services are offered, or airline and all that. So there is no single sort of criteria whether they will be only differentiated or only identical. They could be either identical or differentiated. Oligopoly is also the model where we will actually do not have one single model to is a market structure. We don't have one single model. We will study different sort of market structures. So we will study your king demand curve and your game theory to understand a behavior which is called competition. But there could also be a possible outcome that firms under oligopoly are colluding, and that's why we'll look at two models. One is called formal collusion. Another one is what we call price leadership, as examples of collusion. So what we argue is that because under oligopoly there could be interdependence, this interdependence can lead to either competition or collusion. And we have two different models to look at these behaviors. So that's why now we're going to look at oligopoly's sort of behavior with some models. So the first one is basically called king demand curve. So the first model we'll study is what we call king demand curve. So a king demand curve comes up with the idea that firms under oligopoly are interdependent. And if they are interdependent, then the pricing decision of one firm would take into account how the other firm is reacting. So the theory actually says this. I don't want anyone to make the diagram first, let's understand. And then we'll make a diagram which is an easier version of this diagram. So basically, if you look at Coke and Pepsi, they're competing with each other. So I'm going to make Coke's demand curve. So the theory says this, that Coke would have not one demand curve, but two demand curves that exist at the same time. There would be one demand curve which would be very elastic. And another demand curve, it's called this T1, would be very inelastic. Okay, and what the argument goes is this, that let's say this is the price P naught right now. Okay, if the price is P naught right now, and if this is Coke, and if Coke decides to increase the price above P naught, if Coke decides to increase the price above P naught, Pepsi would be like, you know what, they are increasing the price, let's not do anything. Because when they increase their price, and if we don't do anything, we will get their market share. So therefore, when a price rise will result in no reaction by Pepsi. So this is Coke increasing the price, and as a result of that, Coke would lose its market share. Isn't that true? Because the price is higher, people will move to Pepsi, and Coke would lose its market share, which would mean demand is elastic above P naught. So what they argue is this, that if the price is P naught, how it comes we don't know, but if the price is P naught, any increase in price would mean Pepsi is not going to follow suit, and Coke would as a result lose its market significantly, so they have a very elastic demand curve. And therefore, this part of my demand curve, this is a part of the demand curve that is relevant, AX. Okay? But what if Coke decides to lower the price? If Coke decides to lower the price, Pepsi will follow suit by lowering price as well, because lowering price as well, because when they are lowering price, Pepsi would be afraid of losing market, and that's why this part of the demand curve is no longer valid, because when the price is lowered, no firm will have any significant gain in market share, and that's why your demand would be very inelastic. So you have AX demand curve for the upper part, you have XD2 demand curve for the lower part. In other words, if I want to make a demand curve for the king demand curve would look like this.
What do you mean the upper part and the lower part?
So I'm saying that above P naught, Pepsi is not following suit, not increasing the price. So Pepsi will take away all the market from you. But when you lower your price, Pepsi is afraid of losing its market, so Pepsi will match your price fall, and therefore demand would be like this. Because of them matching, demand would be very inelastic because market share won't change. So when you lower price, everyone will follow suit. When you increase price, no one will follow you. And that is why you have a king demand curve AXD2. Now when you have a king demand curve, this is the part of MR for AX demand curve. But if this is my other demand curve, iska MR, if I want to make this, would be something like this. I mean, it might be coming from Upa, but actually, since this is the part of the demand curve which is valid, from X onward, this is the part of MR will become valid. Because like for this demand curve, MR is valid till all the point here. As soon as this demand curve stops existing, this MR stops existing. As soon as this demand curve starts existing, this MR starts existing. So let's not, I'm going to make a very simple diagram in a little while, but my MR would also be like A, W, let's call this Z, MR. So because of the demand curve being kicked, MR becomes a little weird as well. So what do we mean? Now let's make this diagram together. This is what we're trying to do. So basically, because of the reaction being uneven, price rise, don't do anything, price fall match, you have a king demand curve. And why are you doing this? Why do you care about changing your price? Because you are interdependent. This may not have happened in monopolistic competition because everyone is independent. But either it matters. Okay? So this is how I'm going to make a diagram like this. First let's make the axis. First let's make an elastic part of the demand curve, and then let's make an inelastic part of the demand curve. Okay, so this is my demand curve. Then on the sort of king part or edge part, I'm going to call it P naught Q naught. Okay, so this is so I didn't make the rest of the demand curve for this one or rest of the demand curve for that one because it's not really relevant. Okay, then I'm going to make MR, which is going to be like this. Elastic for this part, and then elastic for this part, and then this one. So my MR is like this, and I have a gap in the middle. Let's call this X to Y, the gap in the middle, and let's call this A. Okay, so this is how I can make my demand and MR for oligopoly. The next step would be to find out the equilibrium. For the equilibrium, I'm going to need to make my marginal cost curve. If my marginal cost is MC naught, then MC is equal to MR happens at this point. MC is equal to MR happens at this point. And if this is the point, the quantity will be Q naught, the price will be P naught. Because MC is equal to MR is happening, because my demand curve is this, my MR is this, so between X and Y, this is my MR, MC is equal to MR, my price will be P naught, my quantity will be Q naught. Isn't that true? What about I increase the cost? What if my cost goes up like this? Again, as long as you are in the zone XY, price will be P naught, quantity will be Q naught. Or even your cost goes down to like MC2. As long as you are between X and Y zone, your marginal cost equals to MR is happening at this zone, and that's why price will remain P naught and quantity will remain Q naught. In other words, what we're saying is just that despite any change in marginal cost, firms are not increasing the price. Why? Because they're absorbing the higher cost. So, for example, if like right now, if you look at fee structure of Lyceum, Cedar, and Nixer, they're all the same. And if our cost goes up, we may not increase the price too much. We'll be like, let's make lower profits, but don't price yourself so high that people start to assume that you're too expensive, because we're competing very closely with each other. Make sense? So you don't want to be a differential in terms of a price. You may decide to make a lower profit, but you don't want to, unless your cost is going too high. Let's say we come up with a program which is significantly different from other schools, which is what is happening at Cedar. But if we, let's say, do that, then you would have a very high cost, and your price would be higher. But as long as you are within a particular, you will absorb that cost. You will not make too much of a change in price. And what we are trying to say is just that because of interdependence, there is price rigidity. Price is not changing because firms are trying to remain within a particular zone of price. So if the price is the same, so how do you compete? And the answer is through non-price competition. What is non-price competition? Advertising, or other aspects, but you don't compete on prices. Make sense? Advertising, after sales service, it could be features of the product, could be quality, and so on. Two lessons from King demand curve is: number one, there is interdependence, and number two, there is price rigidity. And number 3, another lesson could be because of price non-changing, there would be non-price competition that takes place, which is basically after service marketing and so on and so forth. Okay, does that make sense?